What is going on? It is Daniel with Cuervo ATV, and today we're talking about a very important part of a new engine install, and also whenever you're doing clutch work and have the clutch main cover off. So we have a new build here. It is one of our 740cc Trail Monsters. This thing's going to be a blast on a stock swing arm after we get it done. Should be high 70s, a little under 60 foot-pounds of torque. So it's going to be awesome. But today we're talking about how to make all that awesomeness live on initial startup and not have any problems. So I am going to walk you through 100% of what I do on these engines, what I've ran into, and why we are doing it. So we have this machine all put back together. Everything is ready to go. Has fuel in it, maybe. Has batteries, okay, charge condition. We are gonna put some oil in it now. So when an engine is dry, it is gonna take at least 2.5 quarts. So oil change is 2 quarts with the oil filter, but when the engine's dry and new, nothing's coated inside, those little pockets, everything in there, that the oil will stay in after you do your oil change, that's all dry, so they actually need 2.5 quarts. So we are gonna put 1 quart here, actually 1.5 quarts in the oil tank, and we will put another quart directly into the engine through this plug here. So after we do that, then I will show you the next step. All right, so we're gonna go 1 quart down the hatch here. So I'll always fill this side first, as far as fill in the oil tank, and I'll show you why here in a second. Is what we need to do is we need to bleed out any air that is between the oil tank and the bottom of the engine. And I'll go underneath there. That hard line there. So what we're gonna do is we are gonna put that 1.5 quarts of oil in the engine, and we are gonna loosen this fitting here by hand to where that hard line has a little play, and we are going to wait for oil to drip out of there. So I should have had a rag there and whatnot, yes, but I'm going to put an extra 1/2 quart in that tank, and once that starts dripping, then that means that the air that was in that line is out of there. And we can tighten that up, snug it by hand, give it another quarter turn roughly on that. Now that side is done, and we will clean up there. We will pull our funnel from here, and it will go in the other side. And we're going to dump a quart down there. So I have 1.5 quarts in the engine, on the oil tank, and adding another quart to the engine itself. So this is going to go straight into the bottom of the crankcase. And Yamaha does say on their oil change to put 1 in the quart, fire the engine, one in the oil tank, fire the engine, and then put another one in. I disagree with that. I believe you should put 1 in the engine and 1 in the tank. And that is because if the engine is dry, then you have no splash feed going on, splashing any oil up on the cylinder wall, which is very important. And also that oil tank is, or the oil pump that feeds back in the oil tank is running dry and cavitating. So neither of those are a good thing. So I highly recommend doing 1 in the case, one in the oil tank, and calling that good. Okay, so we are going to be done with the funnel for now. So we have 2.5 quarts going on here. Let's see, that can go there. Dipstick is going to go in. If you do a quick test on that, it is going to be almost to the full mark, which that is not accurate for right now because we need to run the engine. So that is tight. We are going to come over here and put a plug in on this side, and I will show you about what is going on here with this oil tank and the oil filter cover. So what is going on here is on the top of your oil filter cover, there is a small bolt here with the copper washer that comes off. That is for checking oil flow. You can also check it up on the cylinder head. I prefer to do it here initially, and then we can check there after, but I prefer to do it here because I can run a line I have there right into a oil can and not make a mess. So that is just there for that. If you don't have something like this, you're going to just put a rag over that so you don't shoot oil at your ceiling. Okay, so this is going to get snugged up. I actually need to change this with one of our fill plugs, but for now, we'll snug that up. Okay, so you say, all right, I'm ready to start it. Well, not yet. What you need to do is, if you have your plastics off, you would unplug your fuel electrical side of your fuel pump. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to, start the engine without knowing we have oil flow, but we don't want to introduce fuel at the same time as we're trying to get oil flow. So what I did here is come back here, and I unplugged the furthest up top fuse, pulled it out. That's the EFI fuse. So when I key it on and turn the run switch on, the fuel pump is not going to run. Okay, now the fuel pump's not going to run. Verify that we are in neutral, and what we are going to do is we're going to crank on the engine. We're going to crank on the engine, and this takes a while sometimes, and I'll show you a trick if it takes a while. And we are going to look for oil flow out of this hose. Now this hose has a little in there already. It's not primed. I haven't primed this thing, so I wanted to show you guys the length of time it may take to do so. Now if your battery's dead or something, you may want to pull your spark plug out to help the engine crank faster. So let's zoom in there a little bit in case it does prime, and we're going to crank on this engine and see what happens. Okay, so I don't recommend cranking on the starter more than 10 seconds at a time. The starter motor itself can get hot and overworked. So as you see, we still have no oil flow there. So we can go about that process a couple of times here, let it rest for a few seconds, come back and crank it again. See if we get oil flow. So I'll do that here one more time, and then we will go to the next step. And I will show you a trick to get it primed if it is not priming by itself. So what can happen though is you could think, okay, I did everything great. I put my engine together properly, put my new cylinder and piston on. I did clutch work. Okay, great. I'm going to fire this up. But what happens is you could start and run this engine thinking everything is good, and that engine run for 3-4 minutes before it ever primes, because the pump is just pulling against air if it doesn't have liquid oil up against the pump itself, nothing's going to happen. It's just going to sit there and crank and crank and crank, and either you don't get oil flow, or if you go and you're like, screw it, I'm just going to start the engine. Well, now your engine is only running on whatever assembly lube that you have on the cylinder. Nothing's getting oiled. So that's extremely dangerous, and the cause of a ton of failures. The guys that don't understand why, when they put their engine together, why it failed right away. And they fail in a catastrophic fashion. So here we go. I'm going to crank on this again. All right, so same thing. We have no oil flow. Say, what's going on? Did I put something together wrong? Is the oil pump working? Why am I not getting oil flow? Well, it still hasn't primed. Normally doing the trick down here of bleeding that line, normally that will do it and make it happen. In this case, and quite often, it doesn't quite do what we want it to do. So next step here that we do is, first I'm gonna get a stand. All right, next step here we are gonna do is we are gonna take a air gun with a rubber tip on there, and we are gonna get our crankcase vent hose. This is the hose that goes right behind the starter. And we are going to do spurts of air until we get oil flow as we're cranking. So every second or so, just a quick spurt of air. That is going to put some pressure throughout the whole engine. And the only exit spot we have right now is the exit of the top of the oil filter into that catch can. So I'm going to set you up on the other side. We're going to crank the engine. I'm going to do some squirts of air, and we are going to see if we can get this primed. So this is one of those topics that's like, should have done it a long time ago. It's a bit hard to completely sort out how I was going to talk about that and go about it. Let's see if we can get a good picture here of that oil filter cover. Okay, we should be able to see some oil flow there. So I'm going to put the rubber hose, air hose into the crankcase vent and crank the engine. And as you see, that went relatively quickly, and we have oil flow throughout that whole line now. After that, we can disconnect our air hose there. We can hook this back up to the intake, and then we are ready to start the engine. So I am going to leave that disconnected for the moment. I'll leave it right there. We'll come back over on this side. And we can unscrew this. And if guys are wondering what these are, this is a 1024 air fitting. Just happens to thread right into the 5mm by 7 bolt without any headache. So now we have oil here. We can crank the engine again, and if you have any concern about it, check oil flow up here and verify that. We will go and remember to either hook our fuel pump back up or reinstall your fuse. That goes back in there. And I think this fuel tank is dry. Yeah, that's probably dry. So it's not going to start right now. Maybe it's got a little left in there. Yeah, that pump is dry at the moment. Well, that is good because I don't have to pump that out. So that is how you prime the oil system. Please share this step. This is missing from a lot of people's rebuilds. A lot of people are dry firing, half of them getting lucky, half of them causing damage that they don't know, and a lot of catastrophics along the way. So that is what we got for today. We will be back with some new videos fairly soon here, I hope. And I'm trying to punch out a lot of these 740 trail monsters. So hit me up if you're interested in one of those, making a lot of very reliable power. Thanks, guys.